likely Democratic primary voters, my name ID has shot up to 69%. Wow. And my competitor, Senator Whitmer, is at 58%.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and Abdul is at 44%, and Bill Cobbs is at 27%.
Wow, sounds like it's coming down to a showdown. Showdown at the
it's coming.
At the convention. What happens? Let me ask you something. Because you're on the outside. I mean, I say that in the sense that you're.
Are you on the outside?
No, I mean he's not a lifelong politician. The Democratic. I mean, he might be for life, but he's not like been in politics his whole life. That's all I'm saying. Do you have a strategy for the what's it called?
The convention.
The convention, yes, the election convention. How does that go down?
Well, now remember, we have a primary, so the gubernatorial candidate is picked on the August 7th primary.
Okay, no convention.
The April 14th convention is only for picking Secretary of State.
And Attorney General. Attorney General.
Attorney General, yeah. But the gubernatorial candidate, primary will be August 7th. That's the important poll date. But the current poll, the only poll important is the August 7th. I get it. Yeah. But I was just excited because the latest poll showed that Whitmer is at 34%. I am at 24%. Abdul is at 8%. And Bill Cobbs is at 3%. All right.
So you're second in the polls. Is that what you're saying? But you're increased as of late, and you're on the rise. All right. So what happens after the primary? Are you going to stay in it? Do you think it's important for you to try to, or after the primary? Wait. This is what I was trying to say. Depending on who wins, if it's between you and Whitmer, do you think one of the plays is whoever doesn't win brings the other one over? Is that something that's talked about or discussed, or is it too early to kind of get there? Or is it just going to be like a campaign of,
Is this like Red Rover?
Yeah.
Well, we are, in the end of the day, we're all Democrats. And we cannot afford to have Bill Schuette as our next governor. It would be a disaster to have.
Yes.
Yeah, we all agree with that. That is true. So, everyone has an incentive. There's a big draw. It's like kind of like in a way, it's like the marijuana issue because he's like the antagonist to marijuana. You bring a lot of people together over that, right? It's such a potent issue, such a powerful issue. It's like almost kind
of like Pat Miles, huh?
Well, it's a one voter issue. So tell us why. So yes, we all agree with that, and explain the strategy for the prevailing with that as the goal.
Well, look, we got to. I'm going to. I love this contrast between me and the State Senator Whitmer. She's been pretty much a corporate Democrat, taking money from Blue Cross Blue Shield.
Right.
In fact, I don't know if you guys know, but there was a fundraiser recently that was a fundraiser on a letterhead of Senator Whitmer's campaign letterhead, signed by 4 top executives of the Blue Cross Blue Shield. That Blue Cross gave the home addresses and names of every employee, and the letter was mailed by the campaign, but it was signed by the 4 executives. And there were specific guidelines on, depending on your position, how much money you should give it to the Whitmer campaign. It's almost like a Whitmer campaign tax for the Blue Cross Blue Shield employees.
Well, that sounds like misconduct inside of Blue Cross Blue Shield. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, unfortunately, this is still legal with the Citizens United and Citizens United on steroid. Such a shameless act is covered under the law, if you can believe it. And, I am for single-payer health care. I think health care should not be a privilege. And Senator Whitmer has not made a commitment on that. How can she with this much of Blue Cross Blue Shield money? And I'm going to fight, and I'm going to show the contrast between someone like me who will not take a single penny from corporate special interest money and the other who is taking so much of that money. I mean, we gotta make this government work for people, and we gotta get away from the corporations. You know, corporations are getting too many loopholes, just too many favors.
That is very true. You are, if I understand things, you are funding your own campaign. Is that right?
Yes. Now, I am not as rich as Rick Snyder, or I'm not as rich as Donald Trump, but I'm very passionate about this opportunity for me to give back to the state of Michigan. And I'm putting a big chunk of my net worth, my retirement money, because I believe in this.
Isn't that one of the major problems with this? Isn't that always the problem for an outsider to try to get in? And that's why there can't be any real major change in legislative circles, because at the end of the day, all this money that there's influences and people are taking it to win, and then they can say and want to do whatever they want. And even if they do and they don't take any money, they run into everyone else has. And they're all not, and it's all incremental. I mean, that's why I always say, why would anyone want to be a politician? And I get it, and it's very hard to stay out of it. But, yeah, and, Citizens United on steroids, as you said, that is, it's outside money. It's like it may not even be local money. It can come from anywhere, and they're influencing the people that are going to be in government. They're sitting on the, judiciary, and so what's the answer?
Well, we don't need 2-year-long election cycles. Look at in Great Britain. 3 months they announce the elections, and the elections are completed. Yeah. We need a shorter process. We need to use more of the public radio, television, newspapers, seminars, debates, forums, and get our word across, and not have to use so much money. And we should restrict use of money, whether it is self-funded or whether it's coming from corporations or taken from people.
That's something that is
the
not.
Money influence has to go.
That is something that is not spoken of enough. I got to say, when you step back and look at, not just at the state level, but the national level as well, how much money goes into this? The pageantry of the campaign. It's quite nauseating when you have such disparity of wealth throughout the country, and it's. I think it's up there with the. Like Trump is criticized because he wanted to have a parade of his military might, like a dictatorship. I don't know that the way we do our political campaigns is much different. The way that the candidates are celebrated. I think it's just a matter of degrees on that. What do you think? That's maybe extreme.
Yeah, I agree, and I think we need to, $1 billion. The presidential campaign costs $1 billion. Money coming from Hollywood and money coming from Koch brothers on the other side. These business people are putting money because they want something in return. And our politicians, once they get elected, they start making favors for these payments, and people get forgotten. And we got to change this. We got to reform this corruption in our political system, and this is hurting our democracy.
I agree.
Amen.
There's all right. So let's go over. I know I may be mistaken, but I know we were talking about some various more in-depth marijuana issues and marijuana policies. We know that you are in favor of medical marijuana and as well legalization. If I recall, you support a tax and regulate kind of model. You recognize, of course, the opioid addiction as a much greater concern. If I missed anything in that regard, or please, if I was correct, that there were some other things you wanted to discuss, or some more minutia of some of the things we may have discussed last time, please go right ahead.
Well, essentially, we need to treat marijuana like alcohol. We need to regulate it. We need to pass the ballot proposal. Once it's passed, we need to make sure that small growers, small businesses get a fair share of that additional revenue. We don't want out-of-state corporations to come in and capitalize on that. We need to. I need to, do something about criminal justice, prison reform, and what we need to expulse some of the records. We need to release. I want to use my power as the governor to pardon, people that are in the prison for non-violent offenders for possession charges, and I would like to, provide them incentives, provide them, opportunity to learn skills, trade skills, vocational skills, and I want to let the returning citizens acquire the skills so that they won't end up in the prisons again.
Yeah, there's very little, if any, resources put towards rehabilitation after prison, and people getting out with felonies are second-class citizens, to say the least. We were discussing with a former state representative the budget for Michigan, something like $8 billion a year, and 1/3 of it goes to the it was like an education, portion where it's for the schools and oversight of some of those agencies associated with the schools. The other 2/3 in the general fund, of which 40% goes to the prison system. 40% of the remaining, which was like, I don't know how many billions of dollars. And Michigan has a huge private prison system, and more money goes into Michigan's private prison system than any other states, like in the top 2 or 3. Michigan prisons of people that get sentenced there, the people, compared to other surrounding states, spend 1.5 to 2 years longer for the same crimes in Michigan. That's the program. It's a big business money budget eater upper.
It is. And I know I want to stop the privatization of our services in prison. That's number one. Number two, we spend $40,000 per prisoner, and we spend $9,000 per student. And that math just doesn't sound right. And we need to stop looking at the opioid problem as a law enforcement issue. This is something where we need to provide counseling and support, and locking up people for opioid abuse isn't the solution.
What about other drugs, Shri? Do you think other drugs should be treated like cocaine and heroin? Do you think those drugs should be treated as a public health issue as opposed to a public safety issue?
The addiction, yes. The addiction we should look at. We should, look at, the cocaine issue, say, for example. A lot of time it is used disproportionately against people of color.
Sorry.
And yeah, go ahead.
I understand what you're saying. It's been changed, but to a certain extent, the charges related to crack were more penalizing, and that was a drug that was, found in certain areas that were predominantly black, and there was uneven punishment because it was that, even though it was the same type of, it was the same molecular structure in the end. But at the end of the day, the amount of money and resources that our government expends for the prosecution of drugs. Firstly, if you just forget all drugs, I'm talking just marijuana. Michigan, if you're not aware, 40% of its laboratory is its budget spent testing marijuana. Now,
exactly,
there should be no excuse why there is not
why aren't those rape kits?
The rape kits aren't getting tested, of course. But how do you stop this? I mean, do you know what kind of, the person in the governor's position is going to be up against legislators that are being dominated by law enforcement? They're very powerful. We saw them, and I never realized that as a lawyer for many years until I started getting into some, advocacy regarding cannabis reform. But the police play, and this is not uncommon, some more in states than other states, but the police play a huge role in, I don't want to say law making, but certainly policy. What about that? How do we stop that?
Well, in general, we need to have the law needs to apply without regards to people of color or the race or religion